guys, it's Kate and hope you're having a fabulous day today. I'm here with a watercolor. I'm working with my MeiLiang palette and I'm doing a single color except for one little accident where I dipped into the pan next to it, but you couldn't even tell the difference. So it still stands, it's one color and that is purple, and there's my accidental dip. But a while back, I had done this watercolor and I kind of put down this splotchy, abstract background. I didn't really have any idea what I wanted to do. I was actually planning on doing some doodles on it and maybe some stamping or something. And I ended up actually kind of enhancing it a little bit and turning it into a landscape. And so this time I actually thought I would try to do it on purpose. One of the things that I really liked about that one, and this one too, is that it really helps to practice values when you don't have to worry about changing out colors and mixing and all of that, and you can make some really beautiful paintings with just one color. So I had this little idea to make kind of a little house or shed or some kind of little building, and then having a couple of trees and some mountains in the background. So you'll see those sort of very basic shapes there. And I had sprayed on the page with a little bit of water. So I'm working very wet and you can kind of see it flowing out and everything, and not a lot of control. So one thing when you're working wet and wet is if you want your paint to kind of stay put. So if you look at what I just did there with my fine liner, I went straight from the pan with some heavy paint. Even if you're working on a very wet page, if you do that, it's not going to move a whole lot, although it will move some. But if you have a very watery mix, like what I've got in my mixing pan there, that will spread out a lot more on a wet sheet. It's hard to control exactly where it will pull as it dries because the paper will kind of wick the moisture, but where it's dried here right now, I'm adding on a second coat and you can see a lot of that dark color straight from the pan is still kind of sitting there on the page. So that's a great way to adjust your values a little bit and also go into wet paint and not have a ton of movement. So what I'm doing now is, now that I'm dry and I have a little bit of a muted background with some variation in the darkness of color, I'm going in now wet over dry to add in those little sketchy dark landscape spots. And this is just, very simple. But I'm putting in some little grassy shapes and some shady areas and just kind of building in a little bit of detail over that really fuzzy background. And I really, really loved how this one turned out, and it was just kind of a fun, relaxing process. And I'm just sort of coaxing the paint a little bit. So I want to make sure to get some details and shadows, but I'm also doing a little bit of dragging with my brush. So if I want to soften any of the edges, I'll just dip my brush in some water and blot it and kind of just sort of coax that paint out a little bit to soften the edge. And I'm also allowing some of the hard edges to stay. So I had kind of envisioned this little light spot in the center of the bottom to be like a stream or something, and then leading to sort of a lake in the background. I don't know if I achieved that. It looks a little bit more like a path than a stream, especially because I had a little bit of a hard time blotting up some of that color. I was hoping to kind of blot up some of that quote unquote lake in the background before you get to the mountains, but it just didn't really want to lift. So this is a pretty staining color that I used. And sometimes that happens, but I really loved the final result. So I'm putting in just some very simple details on that little building. And here you see me kind of going in and defining a little bit better the bottom of that mountain. And this is where right before I was going to be trying to lift the paint that's kind of there in the background. But all's well, it still ended well. and I really enjoyed this painting. It's a great way to practice the values for your paint, to do exercises like this, and it just helps you kind of get a feel for your composition. And I wanted to have sort of some nice kind of fuzzy mountains in the back, and I'm just sort of adding just a little bit of contrast to that one in the front so that you can tell that it's a different mountain, and I'm just leaving the one in the back by itself. And here's where you can see me trying to blot up that paint, but boy, it just did not move. It dried on and it was staying. So I'm just going to finish up that foreground area, and then I'm going to do a little bit more in the trees. But this was actually a pretty fun little painting, and you can see where I'm putting that little border back there. I put some hints of maybe some distant trees in front of the mountains, and I'm darkening up some more areas in that front. I thought that the grasses there on the left looked a little weird, but I was trying to, just kind of go in and fill in some more darkness. And you can see those levels of color just starting to pop a little bit. And now I'm doing a little bit of brush mashing to get some tree leaves in there. And that's in a video that was recent too. It adds a really nice texture. And it's also nice over that wispy color in the background too. And now that I've given the bottom a little bit of a time to dry, I'm going in and kind of adding a little bit more around those grasses at the bottom left. And oops, ended up just putting some shrubs there, like it never happened. And then I thought, well, I don't want to just have, a big dark splotch there, so I added another little tree off in the distance. Can always fix stuff, no problem. And blotting worked really well there, so that was nice. And then I could kind of turn it into not such a blob. I don't know what it is, but I don't know, there's been a couple of videos recently where I have just dropped my paintbrush filled with paint right onto my paper. I don't know what's wrong with me. But I really loved how this turned out. I think, so on the other video, and I'll link it below in case you're interested in watching, it's been a while now, several months maybe, but that one I actually introduced more colors. So I think on my main layer, I used one or two colors, but then when I started building out the landscape, I ended up introducing some other colors as sort of a glaze over that. That worked pretty well too, and if I remember, I may have also used a little bit of fine liner or Posca pen, and you can really kind of go nuts with these. There's a lot you can do when you're adding your final marks, and I mean, you see that a lot in my videos anyway, but there's just a lot of different tools that are at your disposal. So I'm going to go ahead and take the tape off now. We are all done. And I really loved this. It was just so cute, and I liked the little composition and everything. So I think I'd like to try more of these and just keep practicing with those values. But let's give the close-up now, and you can see all the marks and the layers of paint. And this was a fun one. I hope you give it a try. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I appreciate your support. And until next time, keep creating.